I want to speak on the subject of spiritual motivation. One of the things that happens when difficult times come, especially nationally, is that things will come to the surface, the high mountaintops will come down, and the low valleys will come up, and that there's nothing important. Something to this degree of a pandemic will make some of the most important people of non-importance. Some of the biggest strategies of nothing, of no value. Some of the biggest plans into the future, whether it's company, whether it's church, whatever it is, all at once, it's nothing. Everything's brought to a halt. And what that does is it demands a response from people, and some people respond in a different way. But what I saw when I saw this happen, I said, you know, what we're going to see is a meltdown of a lot of organizational things that people have had, people have used. In other words, ways to perhaps have outreaches that were, you know, somebody's motivated to have some kind of an outreach, maybe in some city, or maybe a counseling outreach or something of this nature. But when these things happen, it all at once is not that important. And I noticed that, and I felt like this, that, and I've even mentioned it to numerous people, I've said that there will be a time coming here soon where there will be a meltdown. People that were walking in obedience, they thought it was obedience, it was just their ego. And now when this happens, their ego just goes like that. And so they have no more motivation to do anything. And I've seen that firsthand from organizations that I have talked with or that have even consulted with me that just lost kind of like their ambition to continue because there was all these goals and all these ideas and all the things that we can do to somehow stir an organization to make so that it prospers and get people excited so they give. All at once, when this pandemic happened and shut everything down, nothing was important. And I saw then that people will lose heart. And that's exactly what happened. People lost heart. Now what's going on is people that thought they were walking in obedience, they were only walking under their ego. And so God has to purify this. You see, when it is done, when there is something done in the name of God, He needs to have this thing pure from the heart of God. And so He has to test it. And I think this is the great test that's going on in the spiritual kingdom right now. Churches that have been shut down basically all year. You know, had all kinds of programs and everything was just running on every cylinder, and they had all the classes here and everything was so organized, and all at once it stopped, brought to a halt. Some of the huge churches out there have tremendous fear that they're going to go under, not have enough finances to continue. There's no ego anymore. It has all come to a burning halt. And that which motivated them to, oh yeah, let's do this, and let's excite the people. There's nothing to excite the people. And I believe this is one of the strategies that Satan can use to stop all things. But there again, if you're part of the kingdom of God, your obedience is not based on ego. It's based on obedience. It's based on, I'm not doing this because I get anything out of it. I'm not doing this and doing what I'm doing right now to get anything out of it. I don't get anything out of this. Nothing. I don't get paid. Nothing. I have never gotten paid. Never have I gotten paid to be a pastor of the church that I pastor. In 35 years, I have never gotten paid. I do not get paid. There is no false motivation for me to continue in what I'm doing except sheer obedience. Just obedient to God. And someone has asked me, how do you know whether you have a calling to be a pastor? And I've simply made the statement, I don't know that I have that calling. I don't know that I've ever been called to be a pastor. I don't know that I've ever heard from God that He said that you are called to be a pastor. I don't know that I've ever heard that. I don't recall that I have. All I knew is I had a burden for it. And see, I believe a burden is a calling. And so what's in it for me? Nothing. I have given and spent my life and put the white hair on my head because of simple obedience to God for 35 years in this work. And now that it's being tested, it's like, it's tested by way of, how is it tested? I just use the same method that I always have. Just be obedient. Just do what is your burden. But what I saw in this is there will be people turning away from things that they thought was the will of God. And all at once they see, maybe it isn't the will of God, because it was ego that was feeding it. They looked at the will of God as being an ego because there was something in it for them. You see, in this kingdom that we live in, it's a kingdom of sacrifice. It's a kingdom of giving up. I talked about here in one of the recordings about giving up our rights. It's a kingdom of giving up everything. We give up everything. We lay it down before God. And if He wants to raise something up, it's up to Him. And so I look at this thing of spiritual motivation. I wonder sometimes. I've marveled at how I could walk for so many years in the difficulty that I've faced and not gotten one reward out of anything. I wonder, how can you sustain that? It's because my motivation is just simple obedience. It's nothing that goes into my pocket. It's nothing that makes me feel better. It's nothing that I stand back and say, wow. There's nothing like that. It's simple obedience. And what I'm trying to say is the spiritual motivation that we're needing in this end time is just simple obedience. You might have a gift, and you might have a spiritual gift, or you might have a talent. You don't bury that. There's people that are like, well, I have this talent of this, I have this talent of that. What should I do? Well, if there's nothing in it for me, then I will not exercise. This is what I saw coming. And I've warned people about this, and I'm seeing the collapse of individuals that thought they were doing the will of God or the ways of God by expressing their talents and exercising their talents, and all at once they're now looking at, well, there's nothing in it for me, and they're ready to quit, and they're ready to stop. You see, spiritual obedience is just opposite from that. Spiritual obedience is to continue on because it's in your heart as a burden. It's in your heart as a burden, then it's in your heart as a call. And you respond to it by just being obedient. It's not what you have in it. I actually see that there's a side in me that I have to guard about because I just want to give it up, give up, give up, give up. I just lay it down, lay it down, lay it down. Not what I'm doing, but the idea that I have to have anything coming out of it. Any personal benefit that I can get, I lay that down all the time. And I like to lay it down because I see that Christ is the rewarder. He is the one that gives. My payment is from Him. It's not from the time I spend at the clock. It's not the time card I punch. That's not where I get my reward. My reward is not I don't even consider reward. People have already said that, with all the souls that I've led to Christ in my life, that there will be rewards for you someday. Let me be honest with you. I don't know if there will be or not. I really don't. And it doesn't concern me. It's never an issue to me. I'm not doing it for that. I'm just doing it because of simple obedience. Because simple obedience is a spiritual obedience. And a spiritual obedience needs no reward. A true servant is not looking for reward. He's just wanting to be obedient. It's imprinted in his heart, and he's just responding to what is in his heart. Does he always feel like it? Very seldom that he feels like it. Very seldom that he feels like doing something. But it's obedience. It's obedience, and it's spiritual. And when it's spiritual obedience, nothing will shut it down. You can go through high times and low times, it makes no difference because it's spiritual obedience. And people, if people could learn to walk in spiritual obedience, and people do their giving. People give money, great amounts, and like to some, I'll get a little reward out of it. And they like their name to be advertised. Well, the reward is with them. They won't get it later. That's not why we give. We give because we see the need in our heart. That's why we give. It's those types of things. It's spiritual obedience. There's a huge, vast difference from obedience to simply an idea or to make myself happy or making other people happy than a spiritual obedience that isn't looking for any of that. A spiritual obedience doesn't look for any reward, doesn't look for any honor, doesn't need any honor. It's not about that. The motivating part is obedience, not treasure, not reward, not award. It's obedience. It's just simply, now I am obedient again. You get nothing out of it. If I could somehow explain this better, and I don't know that I can, then we look at some things that Jesus said. He said in Hebrews 5, verse 8, it says, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience to the things that he suffered. Let me tell you something. Spiritual obedience comes from suffering. That's how Jesus learned obedience. It's not what he felt like or what he was taught in school to be obedient to. It was the suffering that he suffered stirred some kind of a spiritual obedience in him that allowed him to be obedient to the day he died. Let me ask you a question. Has your obedience to Christ or to mission, whatever you are called to in life, has that obedience been tested ever? Has that obedience become spiritualized? And if it has, it comes because of suffering. We don't like to suffer. I don't like to suffer. Right now, with all the mess that's going on with COVID-19, there is some personal suffering that it brings to us, and some personal defeat because of perhaps some very strong, opinionated feelings that people have that really try to twist your arm and persuade you different, show you you're wrong, and show you the government is all bad and everything like that. You know, Jesus learned obedience. Where? Where did he learn obedience? Did he learn it from the Father? Did he learn it in the wilderness? Did he learn it after he was baptized with the Holy Spirit? Where did he learn it? He learned it through suffering. So if suffering for righteousness' sake does not promote obedience in you, your obedience is not spiritual. And in times like these, those things disappear. So what do you want? Suffering? Lord, then give me suffering. You know, a lot of times we try to avoid it because we try to always be right in the opinion of man. And as a result of that, we never learn spiritual obedience. Remember that there is no higher obedience, no deeper obedience, no better obedience, no eternal obedience than the obedience that Jesus found, and that was through suffering. So next time we suffer, let's not complain. I know it's easy at times to complain, to get discouraged, but what that should do is stir something in your heart in a spiritual sense that brings obedience to you. What the other option is to give up and just be done. I'm done, I'm finished, I'm not going to go on anymore. I'm finished when you suffer. But Jesus learned that there is some kind of an ingredient in suffering that makes him obedient to the call of God. And he learned that, and he's recommending it to us. Here's another order. I've noticed as pastor, as a business owner, I've noticed that there's people that don't take orders. People think that if you don't repeat something every day to them, that the order is canceled. And I'd like to say that no order is canceled unless the one that has given the order cancels it. Time will not cancel it. Minutes will not cancel it. Hours will not cancel it. Any other man will not cancel it. If it's an order given by authority, it can never be canceled unless the one that authorizes the order cancels it. And some people, I've noticed that, people don't hear. In our day that we live in, there's some orders that perhaps have been given out. I know that even in our church here, I know that there's some things that have been ordered that we ask that certain things do not happen here on the premises. Well, because I don't mention it every day, some people think that it's not an order anymore. Until that order is canceled, it stays as an order. Jesus has given us some of those orders, and I'm just reading one off. I'd like to go through numerous ones, but I want to read this one off. It says in Mark chapter 16, verse 15 and following. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. That's an order. That order has never been canceled. Just because Jesus is not here telling you again to do it, and again to do it, and again to do it, doesn't mean that it is canceled. That is an order. It's never been canceled, so it stands. And until Jesus cancels it, it will not be canceled, and it remains as an order. That is a principle that most professing Christians are very sloppy about. They don't understand it. They don't know what it is. And that will be a tremendous detriment to your Christian life until you learn that. So here it says, He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. He that believeth not shall be damned. And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name shall they cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents. And if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. It's all based on an order. And the order is, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. That's the order. When you follow that order, the rest comes because of obedience and believing. If you do not believe that order that God has, or that Christ has presented to us, and it's the last one He gave before He left the world, then the rest will not follow either. And I just think it's so important to know these things, that the spiritual obedience that God is calling us unto in this awful day that we live in, if I can call it that way, where everything is being shaken. It shakes it down to no more your ego. If you feel like giving up, and you will give up, okay, then it was probably your ego. But the people that will not give up in this latter day are the people that have spiritual obedience, and that they learn through suffering.